What is up, everybody? It's me, Duke Farley, back at it again here on Lost at Sea, and I am unfortunately joined here this evening by Marvin, the third person or the third juror um, of Ascendance season two live. Marvin, what's up? Good to get you on the pod to talk about your game, man.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, it's definitely good to be here. But hey, it 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 happens. It happens.
Shit happens.
Exactly.
But you made the jury, so it's not the end of you on the show.
Not at all. Not at all.
Not at all. So I wanted to start off by asking you, I've played a couple orgs with you now, little Facebook Messenger orgs, Bill's Harry Potter game. And I wanted to see if this was your first experience in the live setting and what made you do it.
Yes, it actually is my first experience in the live setting. So I mean, you saw the experience with my first live, my first org, and now I'm here with my first live experience. Honestly, what made me do it was just that I saw all these people that I knew, like Peyton, Jake, Galen, and I somewhat knew Michael at the time, but I just saw them, do season one, and I'm like, why not give it a shot and see how well I can do? So,
Yeah, and you pretty much killed it. Right up until like the very end, of course. But yeah, that's interesting to hear. Your expectations of Ascendance, like the game and the format, was it what you expected? Or was it different?
okay, so I honestly didn't have any expectations because I didn't know anything about Ascendance. I will say that during one of the challenges, I didn't know what the challenge was, and I'm like, "Hey, like, can you explain the rules again?" And then Nicole's like, "No. Did you watch season one?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Well, that's too bad." I'm like, "Oh, okay. I guess I'll just figure it out." And I can tell you, you probably can figure out which challenge it was. It was the overflow challenge because towards the end, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, do I put the ball? Do I run it over? Do I put it in the bucket? I'm like, what do I do?
You were able to clutch that though. You
Yeah.
uh you outlasted everybody there. Endurance. Would you say that was your strong suit in the challenges? Was like the endurance and like kind of just like physically challenge beasting?
Mm, yes, I think what my strong suit was definitely like the physical, like the endurance challenges when we had to do all the running. Because yes, it may have tired me out, but being someone that's used to running, I'm in the military, so I run on occasion, and it's just something that I'm used to doing. And if I have to keep going, I'll keep going. I mean, I'll complain about it, but I'll keep going.
Seems like a lot of people on the season complain about it. Um, Okay, cool. So your first couple rounds in the game, you win a team challenge and then you go to a couple votes that are pretty straightforward. But there's a fun little segment that you're a part of where, you kind of find a power kind of in the open. And it's like you're looking at people around you, looking at Jodely, you're looking at Kennedy, like, and then you kind of just go and grab it. So I wanted to ask you about that. Like, what was that like?
Okay, so obviously we were strategizing. I think it was when Christopher went, if I'm not mistaken. We're just down there strategizing. I just walked up to the group and I'm like, just looking closely. I'm like, there's definitely something there. I'm like, I don't know what that is. So that's when Kennedy comes up and I'm like, hey, I don't like, is there something there? And obviously she's like, yeah, there is. And at the time, Melissa was literally standing right there. And I'm like, oh shit, Melissa probably saw it too. And I need to grab like Kennedy or somebody to block me, block her view to make sure that she doesn't know that I have it. Well, I guess she never knew that I had it. So, like, at a certain point, I'm like, I just don't care. Like, I'm going to go ahead and go grab it because at this point, if I don't grab it now, someone else will see it and grab it later. So I'm like, I just gonna, go for it. And you know me, you played orgs with me. I don't care if people know if I have something.
You don't. You don't. Not afraid to make a big move. which we see in this season here. But before we get to that, was like, you know, it was apparent that Jodie had seen you grab that. Um, because Jodie mentions it in one of his confessionals. So was that like an ongoing thing throughout the season? Like Jodie knows about your power, kind of like was what was that like?
So Jodie knew that I grabbed a power, but
Yeah,
Jodie didn't know what I had. And throughout the whole time that I was there, it was, and I'm sure you can like see that I was pushing Jodie over Wesley during Wesley's vote is because I'm like, Jodie knows that I have this. Jodie's the one that told people that I have a power. And I'm like, I don't know if that's true, if I'm going to be completely honest to this day. I guess I'll find out at some point eventually. But like that was what I was trying to gear towards. I'm like, Jodie needs to go. Jodie needs to go because I did see that Jodie was well connected with people. No one was like really ever going after Jodie per se. And I'm like, Jodie just needs to go here, like at some point. And it was because Jodie knew about my power.
there was a point where you actually vote Jodie out during the Paul's elimination. So do you think you would say that that played into it, right?
Yes, well, at least I believe it did play into it, but I'm not too entirely sure because I did have a conversation with Jordan, like Kennedy and I had a conversation with Jordan, and we're like, hey, just to let you know, this is why we voted for you. And we told you, both you and Paul, straight up forward that, hey, we're completely torn as to who we're going to vote. It's just going to come down as to what we decided last minute. Even
Right,
though, if I'm to be completely honest, I was always voting Jordan over Paul.
right. Um, so so once you acquire that first half of the pendant, and it's like common knowledge between yourself and Kennedy that you have that, how like urgent was it for you to be searching for the other half throughout the game? Eventually you find it, but was that like top priority for you?
So the first half of the pendant was found on the first night. So I wasn't too worried about trying to go find it that first day. I'm like, I'm just going to wait until the second day to try to find it. And obviously, as you can tell, the perfect opportunity just so happened to be that when Kennedy and I were the only two that weren't blindfolded and inside, and were able to go look for powers. And I'm like, this couldn't have been any more perfect than it is. And I'm like, I'm at that point, I'm like, let's just go. And Kennedy was trying to ask for permission to go find powers. I'm like, Papa said we don't have to watch the challenge, just as long as we're not in the way. That's all he cared about. So
Yeah, that lined up real nicely for you guys. Everybody's blindfolded. Um, I do want to ask about the captainship that you shared with Kennedy. I spoke to Carson a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to get your guys' breakdown on just like the reasoning why split up Carson and Paul. That was a narrative that we were kind of questioning. Um,
I don't know because it's just so happening so fast and it's so in the moment that they're like, come on, pick teams, pick teams, pick teams. At like I knew I was going to pick Carson no matter what, but I didn't realize that Kennedy was going to pick Paul. And because we did have set targets for each team. I forget who Kennedy was trying to target on her team, but I know on my team I was targeting Erica. And that's why Erica was just kind of the default onto my team, or I think she was like the second to last person that I picked on my team. So I really don't know why they got split up.
yeah, Carson was a little bit like he didn't know why either. I think it was just like a little brain fart there. But is what it is. So you also have this other power that you acquire from the what is that? The balloon gate, I believe they're calling
Balloon
it.
Game episode.
Now they're
Yes.
so that those powers were pretty much out in the open as well because well at least Carson's was, and I'd imagine your Melissa's and yours were maybe talked about. Um or were they talked about as much as Carson's
Oh,
was?
so the deal with that is that obviously the three of us ended up getting those powers because we ended up being the callers. And for some reason, I don't know exactly what happened. I think Carson was saying that he doesn't have power, or Melissa was saying that he does have a power or something, and then Melissa was saying that she doesn't have one. This is from what I remember. And then I'm like, you guys are dumb. You guys aren't on the same page. Like, this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, at that point, I'm like, yeah, this is my power. And then the night of the overflow, I just told people, I'm like, yeah, I have a power and this is what it is. I'm able to, pick my own team whenever I need to. It just has to be used at a certain point. So I like it wasn't known by the time the second day rolled around. And I think certain people forgot it, either that or certain individuals just didn't know because I only told the people that I spoke to throughout the game.
Right. So that power, you play it when Thomas wins captain. It seemed like the episode makes it sound like Carson was really urging you on to play that. Would you say that's from your recollection what happened?
Oh, 100%. Because I was just sitting there. I wasn't even thinking of using it. And then I was just like looking down. And then I look up and turn my head to the right. And Carson's just looking at me and he's mouthing. He's like, use it. I'm like, what? He's like, use your team choice or whatever it was, captain's choice. And I'm like, okay. And then that's when I just pulled it up and just started reading it. And I'm like, Papa, I'm like, I got something. And then Thomas was so pissed off that I had to do that. So I'm like, sorry, I have to do what I have to do to keep myself with my allies. So
Right. It's interesting because that power, you were still not safe. You got to pick a team.
yep.
So did I don't remember correct. I don't know if I remember this accurately, but Thomas's team loses that challenge, right? So his
Oh
team go
yes. They failed miserably. I think that challenge made the explanation for the challenge lasted maybe 2 to 3 times longer than the challenge itself.
that's the one that you guys are like running around
Yeah.
trying to get through. So I wanted to ask you, was there ever a thought to, stack your team or try to stack your team with like your allies and then a target and then throw that challenge?
Well, at that point, the only allies that I really had and trusted were HGC, Carson, and Kennedy. So I'm just like, I have to. If obviously Thomas ended up picking Zoe and Carson first, so which confused me. I'm like, why would you do that? Like, it just made like, why wouldn't you pick Carson and Kennedy to be on the same team and then stack with the rest of your alliance? And then you knew that I'm not safe, so why not put me with your allies and tell your allies to throw it? Which would have made a lot more sense if they were trying to target me and Kennedy. But I don't know. But like at that point, I did have to stack myself with Hot Girl Chris and Kennedy because at that point I knew that I would be safe with the two of them. So
Yeah, kind of insulate yourself first
mhm.
and then kind of worry about the rest later. Um, so I want to get into the pendant of power. Um, it's tough, right? Because, at this point, your number one ally, Kennedy, throughout the game is in trouble. So, was there ever a thought, let Kennedy get voted out here and just keep it for myself?
um this okay, so this is just like the similar you've seen this situation with me before. At BB Hogwarts, Goblet of Fire. Um I knew that if I didn't give it to Kennedy, she was gone. I can tell you that right there. 100. I mean, you saw the votes.
Yeah.
Was there any doubt in my mind that I should not give it to her? No, not at all. I'm loyal to a fault. And it does come and bite me back in the ass, as we see, because I'm just left with nothing else and just to fend for myself. And at that point, I had no other cards to deal with. So no, like there was never any doubt of me ever giving her the pendant to use on herself at all. Because that specific pendant, yes, I found both halves, but she was with me both times. And like I said, I'm loyal to a fault, especially when I'm like really close to somebody and it's the only person that I have left in the game. So
Yeah. And I also was thinking like if it came across your mind about, the format of Ascendance as it gets down to like the singular players and it's just like a single, no teams, where you guys could potentially start maybe winning captains and saving one another with the co-captain
mhm.
if that came into play. But you guys, I think you guys just missed that point in the game, unfortunately. We'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. So I spoke to Wesley last week about, same thing, exit interview. Just want to get your side of the the story with there's a little bit of a blow up, but you guys hugged it out at the end. So, water under the bridge. But run me through what happened there. It seemed a little tense in the hallway.
Well, honestly, I shouldn't have been involved in this boat whatsoever, but clearly I'm the one who's running around the whole episode. Like, they didn't show how much running I was doing, how much I was pulling people to talk to them, and it was just a lot. So when I found out that somebody downstairs was saying that I have a power, I'm like, click. The only people that know that I have a power are Kennedy, Wesley, Jodely, and myself. I'm not going to tell these people. I don't talk to them. Kennedy's not stupid to tell these people. So that just left Wesley because I knew Wesley was close with that half as well. But then Jodely as well. The thing is that Wesley did know that I had the half pendant, the first piece.
So
Wesley
when
know that I
when
had
did
the
that
second.
happen? Because I wasn't aware that Wesley was aware of your powers. I only thought
Um,
Jodely was.
I told Wesley about it during, like, after the vote of Christopher going home.
Okay.
So I told him after that. And at that point, like with the whole blow up, I'm like, Wesley, like people don't know this. Papa didn't know this, Nicole didn't know this, the cast members didn't know this, but Wesley and I are actually like best friends outside the game, and they didn't know that whatsoever. So we kept that kind of under wraps, and clearly that's why you see this there's a time where it's me, him, and Melissa in the kitchen just talking, and then there's just some weird handshake that he and I just didn't. It's just weird. But that's why, but with the whole blow up, that's why I was able to just be like, okay, Wesley's telling me the truth. Because I know him outside of this game. I'm like, I know that he wouldn't lie to me about the stupidest shit that you can think of. So I'm like, okay, I love you. Let's get this over with. It's done. And that's when Jodely tries to talk to me. I'm like, Jodely, just don't. I'm done. Like, it's done. It's over.
So you mentioned it, I think earlier in the exit interview, but you basically, you give the pendant of power to Kennedy, assuming she's going to acquire all the votes from everybody in that elimination, and then you tell her vote Jodely, right? Were you like, why didn't you do that?
No, because at some point during the episode, she did say, I did tell her to vote Jodely. But I think it was like the last couple minutes of the scramble. I'm pretty sure they showed it in the episode. We were downstairs in the room, and I'm like, I don't care. Just vote somebody. Jodely or Wesley have to go. I just don't care anymore. Like one of them. And that's after the blow up happened.
Okay.
So yeah. So I'm like,
Right.
and the reason I know exactly why Kennedy voted Wesley over Jolie. And it's because earlier, I think it was after she and I won captain, I told her something that Wesley told me the night before. Wesley told me that he was the one that was planting the seeds with Melissa, telling Melissa that Kennedy's going after her.
So it was in her best interest to vote Wesley out as opposed to Jodie
Yes,
at that point.
because Wesley was the one that was spreading these things about her. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
But like looking back on it now, would it do you wish that she still voted Jodie out instead of Wesley because of your like relationship with Wesley as opposed to Jodie in the game and outside the game, I guess?
I don't think it would have changed anything because they're both set and working with the other side anyways. So
Right. So let's go to your elimination, Marvin. The episode last week, I was talking to Scott Link, friend of the podcast, and we were like, they're trying to give us something that's not Marvin getting eliminated, but we're pretty sure it's Marvin getting eliminated. Was there like, was there like, you couldn't do it? Like, nobody was giving you an inch there?
So as you can tell, people were trying to say that, no, we'll vote with you. Just give us a name. The whole time I knew no one was voting with me. Like no person whatsoever. And I'm not stupid. So that's why I was just running around telling people different names because I was telling each person a different thing about different people. So I'm like, you need to watch out for Taisha and Erica. They're really social. They're going to beat you and get to the end, and you're going to get cut next. I'm like, just mark my words if you don't listen to me now. And then I think the only name that I didn't throw out was Hot Girl Chris because that was the one person that I was aligned with, if I'm not mistaken. And then Zoe, I'm like, Zoe's strategic. I'm like, you need to watch out for her. Like, what it like? And Drew, I mean, Drew is just strategic. Like, I personally did not talk to Drew whatsoever during the game, like whatsoever. So I'm just like, I don't know what you have done. I know clearly you're in a good spot because you're over here essentially holding everything in your hands and running the reins right now. So I'm just like, I don't know. And that's essentially why I ultimately did end up voting for Drew, which, got blocked. So left a unanimous vote.
Were you surprised that he's Papa's reading the votes in it and nobody else's name comes up? Were you
I was so
surprised?
confused. I'm like, I bet these people that are sitting on the couch think that I voted for myself. It wouldn't surprise certain individuals because I have done it before in orgs. I'm like, I'll just vote myself to make people think that somebody's targeting me and try to investigate this one singular vote or whatever and all this other crap. But no, like I was surprised. I'm like, huh? I'm like, clearly somebody either stole my vote or blocked it.
Like looking at the episode, like like knowing what happens where you get your vote blocked, where you're like, wow, this is just kind of like overkill. Like that was not necessary.
Yeah, I personally think that block vote was a waste. It was a waste. Could have probably been used later at some other round if, was it Erica who played it? If Erica needed it, but I don't know. Like I personally think it was a waste knowing that you guys had the votes. Why use a block vote? Because you're scared that I had a pendant.
I mean,
Which I don't blame them because
you
I tend
did.
to be sneaky as fuck.
I was talking to Scott, and you, I think, are the highest scoring player in all my drafts ever at this point, with all your powers and a couple competition wins. So, congrats on that. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, um, leaving the game at that point, was there anybody that you were like, not just like mad at?
Hmm. No. I mean,
You're at peace with it?
the only reason I say that is because I knew that I didn't have connections with, let's see, I didn't have connection with Zoe. Yes, we were on the same starting team, didn't have a connection with her, didn't have a connection with Thomas. Thomas and I were never on the same team throughout the whole game. Drew, I didn't like Drew, if I'm gonna be completely honest. And then Erica, I mean, Erica already knew that I had some sort of like hissy fits because of the whole what was it, food chain episode. And then Jodely, I had just yelled at Jodely. Taisha didn't talk to her really at all throughout the game. Hot Girl Chris, Hot Girl Chris voted for me because Hot Girl Chris needed to do what was best for his game. And leaves Kennedy. So I'm like, there's really nobody that I could be mad at for me leaving but myself. So
Yeah.
because going into the game, I knew 6 people. And those were the only 6 people that I actually worked with throughout the game.
Right. As a whole, would you say like was there anything that you maybe would do differently, or anything that you would change?
Honestly, probably not. I know that I played the game how I thought. I played better than I expected, to say the least, for sure. I didn't know the format. I didn't know, like, if I'm not mistaken, the captain's choice, I probably could have used it after the teams were made, if I'm not mistaken. But that's a question that I need to ask Papa. It was something that I'm like, let me just pick my team. Here you go. But overall, I don't think I would change anything whatsoever. But at there were certain points with those half pendants that we actually almost gave it. I almost gave it to Carson, so Carson would use it on his round for him to stay.
That would have been interesting.
Yes,
Who
but
would have
then
went there? Who would have been eliminated? Let me
um,
check my list. Carson was vote, so that would have probably been Zoe.
yeah, which Paul like either I think that right there, that first jury round pretty much set the tone for like the next couple rounds with Wesley and then me. So I'm like, this, whatever happens this first round is going to set the tone pretty much for the rest of the jury.
So throughout the game, were you like at that point where you understood like maybe where it's a side thing?
I think it became a side thing when Melissa's vote. It was pretty evident and clear that it was a side thing at that point. And then, I mean, during those couple rounds was when I did also realize that people were starting to throw my name out and they didn't think that I knew, but I knew. I'm not stupid. Like once I showed people that I'm a physical threat with running in all these comps, I'm like, people are going to start throwing my name out. And that's exactly what happened. And I'm like, I have no choice but to try to keep winning these comps, or else my name's going to be up there for the vote.
Right. Because I was asking some of the earlier jurors like were they aware of this like kind of 4-person alliance that also has a couple stragglers that are working with them, and they kind of were like, yeah, we could kind of see it.
Like we could see that there was a side, but not once did I know that there was the 4 of Thomas, Taisha, Zoe, and Erica, or is it Drew?
And Drew,
Drew.
yeah.
So yeah, like I didn't know anything of it. I just knew that it was them, like that side with their little stragglers, and then us.
Yeah. And did you feel like the us, like the you, Kennedy, Carson, Hot Girl Chris, even Paul, throw Paul in there? Did you feel like you guys were on the same page with that, or did you feel like maybe not so much as they are?
So I think we were somewhat on the same page, but knowing how people are with these games, people are obviously going to have their side deals and their side things with other people because they're going to do what's going to benefit them the most. So, because I knew Paul at a certain point was talking to Melissa, Carson, same thing. And as we saw, Hot Girl Chris has his thing with Jodie and Taisha. And then Kennedy and Drew from that episode that she uses the pendant, like I didn't know that they were that close.
I think Drew was crying a little bit, or acting. We don't know.
Right.
Well, I mean, killed the game. I'd like to ask everybody before we end the exit interview, what was overall your favorite part of the entire experience?
Um, I don't know. I feel like somebody else said this, but honestly, I loved the whole experience. Like it was just a blast. But if I'm gonna be completely honest, the best part of the whole experience was getting voted out because it was like as soon as I walked around the corner, was walking down the hall, it's just like this weight was lifted off my shoulders. I'm like, can relax now. I can go enjoy myself with the others. I'm like, it sucks, yes, that I got voted out and no longer in the game, but I can relax now and enjoy myself and not have to stress over everything that's happening.
Yeah,
So I guess, yeah, that part.
I can imagine. I can imagine it was stressful, but a little weight off your shoulders. Go play some games in the jury house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the end of you in Ascendance season 2. You will cast a vote for a winner, so that'll be fun to watch how you decide that. But Marvin, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I appreciate it so much, dude.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. So, yeah, no, like seriously, thanks for doing this for all of us who have been voted, getting voted out. It's something that helps the viewers understand more so as to what's actually happening of what's not shown on the screen. So,